Welcome to My Personal Opinion. I'm JM, and well, these are my opinions. Today I'm making my first of many videos on technology. I have decided this video should focus on me and my experiences so that people can decide if I even know what I'm talking about. I am currently best described as a senior cloud architect. Over a course of more than 30 years, I've been everything from a Unix systems administrator in the 90s to building data centers in the early 2000s to architecting and managing cloud infrastructure today. I have also managed IT teams as large as 20 systems engineers running architectures in both Linux and Windows environments. So I know all the great buzzwords like DevOps, Agile, Waterfall, Cloud, DevSecOps, and any other fun idea that has come to life in the recent years. In fact, I remember before the word cloud was a big thing, ASPs or application service providers were the initial future of the internet, but more on that in another video. I am Generation X, and apparently for some, I am also considered a Xennial, as I am part of the tail end of Gen X. I am a child of the 80s and 90s, so I saw the world before and after the internet was a thing. I did get started in computers fairly young. At around 5, I got to play with an Apple IIe that my grandmother brought home from work. She was a school teacher, and at the time, Apple was fairly dominant in the education space. I remember the days of popping in a 5 1/4 floppy disk, turning on the computer, and waiting for such programs as Organ Trail, Number Munchers, The Factory, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, The Hobbit, and even more excitingly, Apple Logo. But I was always the curious one, and I wanted to go beyond just running a computer. And as the years went by, I started to learn to program. My first program experience was in the form of Apple Basic. I loved getting those old books that were full of programs that you had to type in and run. It was often tedious, and if there was a typo, you had to figure it out yourself. Remember, there was no patch updates for paper books and no internet to get a correction from the author. But when the program did what it did for the first time, it was often a rush. I went from Apple IIe to Apple IIgs to the Mac, with some TS-80 and Commodore sprinkled in between. But when my father got involved, he brought home an IBM 8088 computer and a 300 baud modem, which both would set the course of my career. My interest fell into a concept called BBSs, a popular system in the 80s and 90s before the internet was popular or even most people even knew what it was. These were ways to set up a computer system so that it could answer calls from other computers, present menus containing everything from files to download, messages to send between users, and games commonly known as doors for people to play. In the early days of BBSs, most people had a single phone line in their system with people dialing in one at a time. So one of the more clever game designs were a multiplayer system with turn-based solutions where you could do something, have that saved, and then the next person who logged in could also take a turn, and so on. One of the popular games, Trade Wars 2002, remains so nostalgic that even some people simulate that environment today over the internet. Now, understand most of those games and menus were text-based. Though clever ideas like ASCII art came about, using text and color to make images, I'd encourage people to actually check some of this out. Simply Google ASCII art, ASCII art, and be amazed. It is truly a case of necessity being the mother of invention. As my BBS grew, we got involved in a network called FidoNet, which allowed BBS to BBS communications all over the United States and to some extent the world. I became a node coordinator for our small town, expanding to multiple phone lines and 56K modems, and helping dozens of other BBS connect to this network. Eventually, at the later half of the 90s, we started pivoting the entire system to a full-fledged internet service provider. If I remember correctly, we had about 20 phone lines, eventually shutting down the BBS site itself and simply offering basic dial-up internet. Unfortunately, our town got swamped with larger ISPs looking to undercut everyone, so we had to pack it up right before I left for college, but it was still an educational ride. I went to college in our neighboring city in California with the intention of going into law, but a large telecommunications firm eventually caught my attention. I interviewed with them, they liked what I brought to the table, and they offered a salary that my little experienced mind jumped on. It was exciting for somebody just out of high school to be offered a job at a big company, and I was all over it. Over the years, I would go up the career ladder and work with various companies, some big, some small. I found I loved the smaller firms because you could get more involved and have a lot more say, but the larger firms offer little bit of security, so I tried both. I would eventually end up in San Francisco during the dot-com boom. My experience was more systems administration than programming, but I was often helping develop automation systems with such programming languages as Perl and eventually Python. I was loving San Francisco. I was living in San Rafael and commuting via ferry across the bay, passing the Alcatraz and being dropped off at Pier 1. I was walking in a vibrant city, seeing everything anyone could want beyond the tourist traps. Sure, I spent the first few months living there like a tourist, but eventually I was able to listen to jazz in a bar in a weird part of town that only the locals knew. Fortunately, of course, as many of you may know, the dot-com era came to a harsh end. I watched an idea fall apart. To a point, we watched companies sell themselves off in pieces, often selling their office supplies, furniture, foosball tables, and those of us that were still alive would go over and buy it like vultures. This was further disrupted, sadly, by the events of September 11th, 2001. Eventually, I ended up back in Southern California, building up skills in different areas and different styles. I got to hear so many perspectives over the years. It developed my approach to technology. I was never into the Apple versus Windows versus Linux debate. Rather, I was about what works for the job. That approach has always been key to any of my recommendations or any of my system architectures I've designed. I ended up leaving California for Utah in 2010. Here I have worked for big cloud providers and small startups. I've helped design data centers, cloud architectures, and everything in between. And of course, as I continue to build up skills, I am now currently looking at artificial intelligence, talking about its pros and cons, and looking at ways we can not only benefit from it, but also protect ourselves from it and put safety nets down to keep it from going in the wrong direction. I do happen to game as well. I have a gaming setup for PC, but I also have every other console, and as a fan of VR, I have a few different headsets. Currently, I got access to Sony's PSVR 2, and I'm loving it. I also have a Meta Quest 2, and do both PC VR as well as standalone games. Today, I'm looking for ways to expand out, share my ideas, and hope that my experiences can help others. I'm currently developing a YouTube channel to take these experiences and let others use them in whatever way they need. For my audience, I consider this channel as much as yours as it is mine, so feedback is of utmost importance. Let me know what's working, what topics you'd like me to cover, and what I can do to do better. I will be constantly striving to improving the channel and improving my techniques and improving my skills. I plan to try to be as non-technobabble as possible. I would love to be asked if any terms that I throw out there, what they are and whether or not it's something I might need to cover at a later time. Either I may answer it in the comment section or maybe even consider making a video about it. If you like this content, I would love it if you could like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and comment down below. The more I can grow the channel, the more I can develop the channel to provide topics based on my experiences. I wish you all the best, and I'll see you in the next video. These are, of course, my opinions. Peace.